What if that nagging feeling in the back of your neck was real? What if those hands reaching out from the dark that you believed were there were there? What if the monster in the basement really existed? And what if there was really something under the bed? Would you have the courage to face your fears?
I'm recording this because someone needs to know what happened. If you're reading this, I hope you're somewhere safe. I hope there's still somewhere safe left. It started with the emergency broadcasts. I was driving home from my late shift at the radio station when every channel suddenly cut to that horrible blaring tone. You know the one. We'd all heard it during tests. But this time, it didn't stop after the usual, "This is a test of the emergency broadcast system." Instead, a calm male voice began speaking. "This is not a drill. All citizens are advised to seek immediate shelter. Repeat, this is not a drill." I pulled over to the side of the empty highway, my hands shaking as I turned up the volume. The voice continued listing coordinates of confirmed launches, but I couldn't process the numbers. All I could think about was my daughter Katie, staying at her mother's house 40 miles away. The sky to the east lit up like a second sunrise. I didn't hear the blast, not at first at least. The light was so bright I had to look away, even though it was just on the horizon. When the sound finally reached me, it wasn't what I expected. Not a sharp crack or boom, but a long, deep rumble that I felt in my chest more than heard. I tried calling Katie's mother, but the phones were already dead. The radio had dissolved into static. As I sat there, paralyzed with indecision, I watched other cars speed past me in both directions, some heading toward the city, others fleeing from it. Everyone looking for somewhere safe, somewhere to hide from what was coming. That was 3 days ago. The fallout clouds had turned the sky a sickly greenish brown. I've been broadcasting on emergency power from the station, trying to reach anyone still out there, trying to find my Katie. The radiation meters are climbing, but I'm not leaving until I know. If you're reading this, and you've seen a 12-year-old girl with dark hair and a purple backpack, please, just let me know she's safe. I'll keep broadcasting as long as I can. I have to believe someone's still listening. The station's emergency generators won't last much longer. I can hear them sputtering now, like a dying animal. But that's not what's keeping me up at night. It's the footsteps. They echo through the empty halls of the station after midnight. At first, I thought it was just other survivors looking for shelter. I'd call out, but no one ever answered. The footsteps would just stop, and when I'd check the security cameras, there was nothing but static. Last night was different. I was in the middle of my usual broadcast, reading out names from the missing persons list that people had slipped under the door before the air got too bad to go outside. That's when I heard it. The sound of a child laughing. It came from Studio B, down the hall. Katie's laugh. I'd know it anywhere. I ran to the studio, but when I got there, the room was empty, except for one thing. A small handprint on the dusty mixing board. A child's handprint. The same size as Katie's. The radiation counter in that room was off the charts. I've been getting more calls lately, breaking through the static. People claiming they've seen their dead loved ones walking through the ashes storms. A woman in what's left of the suburbs said her husband, who died in the initial blast, came home and sat in his favorite chair like nothing had happened. His skin was falling off, but he just smiled at her. The military broadcast stopped yesterday. The last transmission was just someone screaming about shadows that moved on their own, before the signal cut out completely. I heard that same laugh again in the background. The generators are failing, and the emergency lights are getting dim. But I'm starting to think the darkness might be safer, because now, when I look down the hall towards Studio B, I can see small footprints in the dust. They lead me to my door, and they're getting closer. The generators died at 3:47 a.m. I know because I was staring at the digital clock when it happened, watching those red numbers flick and fade to black. The silence that followed was deafening. For 6 days I've had the constant hum of machinery as my companion. Now there was nothing. Nothing except the sound of someone humming, "You Are My Sunshine," from somewhere in the darkness. It was Katie's favorite song. I used to sing it to her every night before bed, even after the divorce, when our time together became measured in weekends and phone calls. The humming was coming from the break room, where I'd set up my makeshift bed. I knew I shouldn't follow it. But what kind of father would I be if I didn't? The emergency lights in the hallway flickered weakly, running on their last backup batteries. The temperature had dropped significantly. I could see my breath in the beam of my flashlight. The humming grew louder as I approached the break room, and beneath it, I could hear the soft scraping of chair legs against linoleum. When I reached the doorway, the humming stopped. Katie was sitting at the table, her back to me. That purple backpack I brought her still strapped to her shoulders. My flashlight beam trembled as I called out her name. She turned around, and I dropped the flashlight. I'm writing this now from the supply closet. I barricaded the door with everything I could find. The thing in the break room. It looked like Katie, but only in the way that a reflection in broken glass looks like you. All the pieces were there, but they were wrong, twisted. And its eyes. Jesus, its eyes. The worst part? I'm not alone in here. There's something breathing in the dark with me. I can feel it getting closer. The air is thick with radiation. My Geiger counter is crackling like burning wood. It's starting to hum again. I need to tell you something about that first night when the bombs fell. Something I haven't admitted to anyone, not even myself. I could have driven to Katie's. I had time before the fallout started, but I was afraid. I convinced myself the station was safer, that I could help more people from here. The truth is, I'm just a coward. Now I know what the footprints in the dust mean, what all this means. They're not just random victims of radiation showing up at people's doors. They're here for a reason. They're here for the ones we left behind. The humming is right outside the closet door. The handle is turning. Katie, baby, I'm so sorry I didn't come for you. Daddy's sorry. I survived the night in the supply closet, but I wish I hadn't. When the door finally opened, there was nothing there. No Katie, no monster. Just empty darkness and the ever-present clicking of my Geiger counter. But something had changed. The walls of the station. They're different now. Wrong. Like they're breathing. I found messages carved into the supply closet walls. Hundreds of them. Overlapping each other. They weren't there before. Some in languages I don't recognize. They all seem to be saying the same thing. Come home. The emergency broadcast system suddenly kicked back on this morning. Even though there's no power. No generators. Nothing that could possibly be powering it. Instead of the usual alert tone, it's playing recordings of my old radio shows. All the times I talked about Katie on air. All the birthdays I missed because I was working. All the promises I broke. But between the recordings, there are voices. Hundreds of voices. Whispering coordinates. The same coordinates that were broadcast the night of the bombs. When I map them out, they form a pattern. A spiral. And the station? The station is at the center. I tried to leave, to make a run for it, but the front doors won't open anymore. The windows show nothing but static, like an old TV screen. The only clear view is from the broadcast booth, and I wish to God I hadn't looked. The city isn't there anymore. Where buildings should be, there's just a vast field of crosses made of shadow, stretching to the horizon. They're moving, swaying without wind, and between them, small figures with backpacks are walking through the ash, all heading this way. The radiation levels are impossible now. The Geiger counter just shows infinity. I should be dead. And maybe I am. I found a note in my pocket that I know I didn't write. It's in Katie's handwriting, but the letters are backwards, like they were written from the other side of the paper. Daddy, why did you leave us out there? We're all coming to the station now. Everyone who was left behind. Everyone who waited for help that never came. We just wanted to go home. Don't you want to go home, Daddy? The walls are definitely breathing now. The equipment in the broadcast booth keeps turning itself on, playing fragments of that last day. I can hear footsteps again, but this time it's not just Katie. It sounds like hundreds of feet, moving in unison, getting closer. They're in the building. The stairs are full of shadows. I think it's time to go home. They found me in the broadcast booth. I don't know why I'm still alive. Maybe that's not the right word anymore. Alive. There were hundreds of them. Children clutching backpacks and teddy bears. Parents still in their business suits. Elderly people in hospital gowns. All of them wrong in ways that hurt to look at. Like someone had tried to draw people from memory, but kept making mistakes. They didn't touch me. They just stood there, watching. Their shadows didn't match their bodies. Too long and too twisted, moving when they were still. And in the back of the crowd, I saw Katie. But not just one Katie. Dozens of her. Each one slightly different, like versions from parallel universes where I made different choices, where I failed her in different ways. The Katies spoke in unison. Show them, Daddy. Show them what you saw. My hands moved on their own, turning on the broadcasting equipment. The dials all spun to impossible frequencies, numbers that shouldn't exist. Static filled the room, but underneath it, I could hear voices. Millions of voices. All overlapping. Why didn't you come? We waited. Help never came. You left us. The radiation meter exploded, showering the booth with glass and sparks. But in those sparks, I saw it. The truth. What really happened that night. The bombs weren't bombs at all. I've been piecing it together. The coordinates. The spiral pattern. The impossible readings. They weren't launching sites. They were arrival points. That light in the horizon wasn't a nuclear blast. It was something opening. Something that had been waiting for us to destroy ourselves enough to let them in. The radiation isn't radiation at all. It's more like bleed through. Reality breaking down where they entered our world. And now they're using our guilt to reshape everything. Our abandoned loved ones are just the templates they're using to take form. To make us accept them. To make us want to go home. The shadows are worse now. They're not even pretending to be attached to anything anymore. They're just shapes. Hungry shapes. And they're spreading out from the station, using our broadcast signals to reach everyone else who left someone behind. The Katies are showing me things. Memories. But not just mine. Everyone's memories. Every abandoned child. Every forgotten parent. Every broken promise. They're all here. All broadcasting out into the static. The walls of the station are gone. We're suspended in something that looks like the space between TV channels now. The other stations are out there in the darkness, glowing like dying stars, all broadcasting the same signals, all calling people home. My hands are changing as I write this, becoming less real, more like a signal, like static. They say everyone I let down is waiting for me at home. They say home isn't a place anymore. It's a frequency. The frequency is a hungry thing. It eats memories, broadcasts them like reruns of old shows, and then eats those too. I've watched my life with Katie play out 1,000 times now, each viewing more distorted than the last. Sometimes she's older, sometimes she's younger, sometimes she was never born at all. And those are the worst versions because they feel the most true. The other survivors who took shelter in a nearby building are being drawn to the station now. I can see them walking through the static space, their bodies flickering like bad reception. They all have the same look in their eyes, the look of people who left someone behind. I understand now why they chose a radio station, why they chose me. Broadcasting isn't just about sending signals. It's about reaching into empty spaces and filling them with something. That's what they are. Empty spaces trying to fill themselves with us. The Katie's taught me how to read the static. It's like a language once you know how to listen. Every burst of white noise is a confession. Every pop and crackle is someone begging for forgiveness. The entire electromagnetic spectrum is screaming. One of the other GJs who used to work here, Mike, showed up an hour ago. Or where it used to be Mike. He's more television snow than person now. But he told me something important before his face became static. They've been here before. Every mass extinction. Every civilization that disappeared without a trace. They don't destroy worlds. They change channels. The shadows are getting impatient. They want me to help them broadcast the final signal. The one that will tune every survivor to their frequency. They keep showing me what they call home. A place where all possible versions of every moment exist simultaneously. Where I can be with every version of Katie, even the ones that never existed. But I can still hear the real broadcasts cutting through sometimes. Military channels, other survivors, people still fighting. They don't know what they're fighting against. How do you fight a signal? The Katies say I don't have a choice anymore. That once you've been behind the static, you can't change the channel back. But they're wrong. I found another frequency. It's harder to tune into. It hurts, like pressing on a bruise. But it's real and raw, the opposite of static. It's silence. True silence. The kind that comes before a broadcast. The kind that just might save what's left of humanity. But reaching it will cost everything. All my memories of Katie. All my guilt. All of me. The shadows are scratching at the booth now. They know what I'm planning. I don't have much time. If you're receiving this, it means I succeeded. Or maybe I failed. The difference doesn't matter anymore because I don't exist enough to know the difference. The silence frequency was never meant to be a weapon. It was a gift from the last civilization they consumed. A way to unmake their signal. But using it means unmaking yourself too. Becoming a different kind of empty space. The kind they can't fill. The Katies tried to stop me. All of them. They showed me every possible happy ending. Every version of reality where I made it to her mother's house that night. Where I saved her. Where we lived. But that's the thing about radio, eventually. Every song has to end. The hardest part wasn't finding the courage to broadcast the silence. It was remembering what Katie really looked like. One last time. Before letting that memory go. Not the twisted versions they created, but my real daughter. The way she smiled. The sound of her laugh. The feel of her hand in mine. I'm broadcasting this final message across all frequencies as the silence builds. To anyone still out there, still human enough to receive it. When the static comes for you, showing you everything you lost, everyone you failed, don't look away. Don't try to tune it out. Face it and accept it, and then let it go. Because that's what they don't understand about us, about humanity. We're not just about the sum of our memories, our guilt, our failures. We're the space between stations, the pause between songs, the moment before we press play. The silence is almost here now. I can feel myself becoming something else, not static, not signal, and not memory. The Katies are screaming, their forms dissolving into television snow. The shadows are retreating, pulling back into dimensions they understand. The things that came through disguised as nuclear fire are being unmade by something more powerful than their frequencies. The absence of signal, the absence of guilt, and the absence of self. To Katie, my real Katie. If you're somehow still out there, I love you. Not the memory of you. Not the guilt of leaving you. Just you. To anyone receiving this, remember us. Remember that when the static came for humanity, we chose silence. We chose emptiness. We chose to unmake ourselves to save what was left. And if something is still broadcasting after today, it isn't us. Don't tune in. Don't listen to its promises. Don't let it show you what you've lost. Change the channel. Turn off the radio. Embrace the silence. This is signing off for the last time. Forever. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed that story. Come back next time for some more scary stories, and as always, remember to face your fears.